Welcome to another episode of Hemp Barons. I'm Dan Humiston, and on today's show we meet an upstate New York hemp-fiber farmer whose relentless spirit is inspiring people twice his age. This 22-year-old hemp baron is moving the hemp industry to new heights. Let's join Joy's conversation with Aidan Woishinis from What Canna Do.
Well, hello, Aidan. Thank you so much for being with us on Hemp Barons today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
You inspire me on so many different levels because, and I met you a few years ago, Aidan, the promise that you bring to the emerging hemp industries, particularly in New York State, as a 23-year-old whippersnapper is just so impressive to me. Your intellect, your diplomacy, the grace in which you operate, your professionalism, and your tremendous drive to really develop relationships and outreach to the many industries that hemp can serve, but they need to be educated. So you have formed a research and education and consulting firm, What Canna Do. First, tell us about what brought you into hemp. How did you discover this amazing, versatile, valuable plant that serves all of humanity's needs?
Well, to begin with, I grew up in upstate New York, and my parents had started a scientific publishing company. Through this publishing company, they published data on different materials science. So I kind of have a background of material science and an interest in the different materials that we can potentially make. Graduating high school, I had smoked some pot at the time. And so I had actually headed out onto the West Coast for 3 months backpacking, trying to share the word of marijuana. Are you familiar with an organization called SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy?
10 million times over. Boy, do they do tremendous work.
Yes, they do. So before I headed out to the West Coast, I actually hooked up with them because I had a good understanding of science that went into marijuana and cannabis, but I didn't really know all that much about the law side. And so I actually went to their 2014 National Convention down in Washington, and then I learned about all the law and kind of who's in the game and everything. And then I went out to the West Coast, and I started just talking about marijuana to anybody that was interested, or if they weren't interested, would just talk about the benefits and the pluses and minuses and all that kind of stuff. But I came to the conclusion that many people didn't want to talk about drugs.
I want to stop here for just a quick second and ding, 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 ring the bell here, brother. 2014, you were an 18-year-old teenager, and you heard
Yes.
the call, and that goes right into why I just am so impressed by you, and why, in fact, I have asked you to take over the presidency of the New York Hemp Industries Association, and the board, of course, confirmed you in, and I'm now your secretary, brother. Yes. 18 years old. You get motivated, you get inspired, and you don't fool around with it. I'm sure you did stuff on the internet, and believe me, internet research is great. You went to the National Convention for Students for Sensible Drug Policy at the age of 18 to get information, get plugged in, travel, and spread the word and learn. I mean, oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, SSDP is an amazing organization to anybody that's out there that's interested in getting in to worrying about law and policy in the different drug spaces, whether it's psychedelics or marijuana. They're definitely a force to be with. I was out on the West Coast, and I was talking about marijuana, mostly the medicinal side of it. As I said, most people just didn't want to talk about drugs because there's so much stigma around it. So I had kind of heard about hemp, but I didn't really know that much about it. And since I was out on the West Coast backpacking, all I had was my phone. For 2 weeks that I was in Portland, Oregon, I actually spent just going to a library and just learning about hemp as much as I possibly could. And then I started having conversations with people, and I came to the conclusion that all marijuana is THC, because you have to have below 0.3% THC for it to be hemp, and anything above that can be marijuana. So really all marijuana is THC. Also, I could now talk to not just medical patients or pharmaceutical companies, but I could talk to construction workers. I could talk to farmers. I could talk to building companies. I could talk to car companies and composites industries. I could talk to so many different people that it opened up my world and my perspective. So I spent, as I said, about 3 months on the West Coast. And then just about December, I came home. I spent 7 months mucking stalls in the little town of Gilbertsville. And then after those 7 months were up, I went to 1 year of college in Prescott, Arizona, and met a great friend who has helped me on my journey since. And ever since then, I kind of just been in the hemp industry, and I started just going to conventions and going to meetings. Went to the first NYHA meeting, and that's how I met you, which is wonderful. And now I've just kind of been pushing the whole movement along the road. I'm amazed that we've gotten as far as we are. It's quite something to be able to grow hemp legally in my backyard. So that's kind of how I got onto this road. Was initially was in marijuana, and then decided that hemp was a better route to take.
And in terms particularly of just environmental impact, to really participate in the Industrial Revolution, when we talk about, and listeners who may be listening each week, of course, you hear me say this list quite a bit, but I can't do a show without saying it. We're talking about human and animal nutrition, cosmetics, nutraceuticals, body care, pharmaceuticals, paper, textiles, building materials, composites, bioresins, industrial sealants and coatings, energy and fuel, nanotechnology. I mean, somebody stop us. It's all of this. 5 years is a long time, especially as we like to say in hemp years. 5 years is, 100 years at this rate in the revolution. So you went from the 18-year-old on his quest for civil rights and to liberate the healing aspects of the cannabis plant from a marijuana perspective and heading out to the West Coast to now, and it's not just now, it's been some time now, with suits and ties and dress shirts and making appointments with CEOs and other representatives from all of these various industries and really connecting the dots. So what Canna Do, your research and education and consulting firm, is just that. Lots of information and education. I know you have events. Your website is a tremendous resource, whatcannado.com. Building the infrastructure in the community and developing relationships. And again, the outreach, it's so important. The chopping of the wood and the carrying of the water, of really creating markets for our farmers, getting hemp into these products means banging down doors and making phone calls with all of those industries. And that is probably when I first met you and discovered you were doing that and making those calls and beating down those doors, I was just like, oh my God, this Aidan Woishinis is just amazing. Let's talk about for a second, on top of all of those things that you do, what Canna Do also has, as you say, a licensed hemp farm in the Catskill region of New York. And unlike 80 to 90% of the hemp being grown in the United States, and the macrocosm of that is 80 to 90% of the hemp being grown in New York State, you, sir, are growing for fiber. So tell us a little bit about that.
As you said, most people are growing for an extract crop, whereas most people know CBD extract. As I said, I came from a materials science background, and I was really focused on fiber, and I kind of see fiber as the future of the hemp industry, at least in the United States. A big part of that is because countries like Canada, for example, has a pretty strong grasp on the grain industry. And so fiber is really kind of where my passions lie. But it's also easiest to grow for the farmer. It's a little more challenging for the processor, and it can turn into a very, very, very wide variety of products. The biggest difficulty, though, is the infrastructure. CBD is a little bit easier because all the same technology that's used for marijuana can be applied to the CBD industry. And so it's a pretty easy switch around. But for the fiber industry and also for the grain industry, we need to build out the infrastructure, and that takes time. It takes time to build out any new industry. But I knew that if I really wanted to be serious about the fiber industry, I had to put seed in the ground, because there's only so much you can research online. And also there's so much information that's just not correct online, or is taken from sources that are just not going to be what we see in the US. And so I just wanted to put seed in the ground and see what it was like to grow. When I put seed in the ground, there wasn't actually a processor in New York State. So I pretty much was not going to be able to harvest my crop or send it off anywhere, but that was okay. I did a ton of learning the first year, because hemp is certainly not a simple crop to grow. And then the second year, this year, we grew about 13 acres, and all of it was very successful. It was a little stunted from the weather, but we got really good quality fiber. A little kind of note on the growing end of things. So for people that are familiar with CBD crops, you're on average looking at about 2,500 plants per acre. Whereas with fiber crops, you're looking at about 60 pounds of seed per acre. Natural fibers versus, say, like carbon fiber, which is made in the lab, you have a lot of variability in the natural fibers, and you want to reduce that as much as possible. Like the carbon fiber, it's going to be the same thickness, same strength, same density all the way across the entire fiber. With natural fibers, that may not be the case, just based on the growing conditions, based on how the plant grows, and many other things. And so you want to grow it really, really close together so you get really strong, straight, long, tall plants with very limited or no branching.
And that really lends itself to processing. If we were to talk about plants, say, per square meter, it translates into somewhere between 250 to 400 plants per square meter, depending on what actually popped up of what you planted there. And let's talk for a minute. We can also share with the listeners about certified pedigreed seed. And the lesson there, or the foundation for this concept is, of course, in agriculture, we have certified pedigreed seeds. Certainly there are many different strawberries, many different tomatoes. And in agriculture, certified pedigreed seeds are very much relied upon for obvious reasons. And a manufacturer, an end user, is not going to get into a contract with a farmer if they're not perfectly assured of exactly what variety and type and the nutritional characteristics or even the physical characteristics of that produce or that crop is going to be. And the same is with hemp. And of course, the United States, we've been asleep at the wheel here for a bit. So before we even got on board with the 2014 Farm Bill, and then of course now legalizing it as an agricultural commodity in the 2018 Farm Bill, there were already 31 developed countries who began to regulate this crop long before the United States did. And these global seed certifying agencies that deal with all of the agricultural commodities and products across the world, the biggest ones, of course, being AOSCA, the Association of Official Seed Certifying Agencies, and another very reliable global certifier, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperative Development. They have long since, although I say long, again, we're talking hemp years, right? So it's been about 5 years to 7 years that AOSCA has had a seed certifying recommendations and system for hemp. So we've got these certified pedigreed seeds for grain varieties, the nutrition varieties, and we have these certified seeds for fiber varieties, not yet for extract or CBD varieties. It takes some 8 to 13 years to really breed a seed so that it's unique, distinct, and stable. And those, of course, are the three paramount words around what is a certified pedigreed seed. Is in fact a unique, distinct, stable seed that is maintained in a breeding program, so you're getting the same product every time. The issue is that the United States, of course, has its own climates with an S, its own soil periods with an S, its own soil conditions with an S, all over the regions of our large country. So we plant these certified pedigreed seeds from Canada. They have some wonderful nutritional varieties, or Finland, but they don't necessarily grow so well in Kentucky. And when we talk about fiber in particular, that's the same. There are end users, and there are certainly developed industries, car making parts and so on and so forth in Europe, where they are already using hemp. They may want an actual specific characteristic of a diameter of a stalk so that the vast fiber is going to have a specific application for their end use. So how did you come across your seeds, to the extent you can share? You're a businessman. There's some proprietary stuff there. And did you use certified pedigreed seeds? And what are your thoughts around that for fiber?
So the seed I used was actually certified in Italy. I sourced it out of the United States, but the company is originally from Italy. So for those that aren't familiar, there's fiber varieties, there's grain varieties, and then there's extract varieties. Within that, you can have sometimes dual purpose varieties, so things that are both grain and fiber, or CBD and fiber. And so I technically grew a dual purpose crop, that I didn't actually grow it as a dual purpose crop. It's a fiber and grain crop. So instead of getting to 14 to maybe 15 feet tall that maybe a fiber only variety would get to, you're looking more at like 10 feet tall at maximum. You definitely hit it head on the nail. The big issue we're having right now is just the genetic on different varieties. That, yes, you can have a variety that's very, very well bred to a specific microclimate in, say, Europe. And then you bring it to the United States, and your microclimate may be kind of similar to that area, but then your soil type might be different. The weather patterns might be different, and all the different things that go into that. And now you're having the crop is just growing in very unexpected ways. And so that's definitely something that's an issue. And I think it's going to take some time. As you said, it takes like 10 to 13 years to really stabilize a variety. You see actually in the CBD world, many people are trying to sell like their first year grown crop to the industry. And that's just not capable. You're going to have really junky seeds. It's definitely going to take some time. I know Cornell is working on putting together some genetics for the United States, particularly in New York State. And different universities around the country are, but it's definitely going to take time if we really see genetics that are fully stabilized to our own microclimates and that will actually grow really well here. There's a lot of concerns to go into that and a lot of things to think about.
Today's show is sponsored by Creating Better Days and their line of high-quality CBD products. The benefits of including CBD into your wellness lifestyle are well documented, but with so many brands, it's hard to know which one to trust. Creating Better Days' manufacturing process includes an additional step, that includes nano emulsification technology, making their products more effective, faster absorbent, and more potent. And with the transparency of specific QR codes and lot numbers on each package, you can be confident that you always receive the highest quality CBD from U.S. grown hemp. To learn more about Creating Better Day's high-quality CBD products and to receive 20% off today's order, go to creatingbetterdays.com/raising. That's creatingbetterdays.com/raising to get 20% off today's order. Creating Better Days, trusted, high-quality hemp CBD products.
Larry Smart, PhD, hemp hero of epic proportions. In fact, along with his wife, another PhD, Chris Smart. He was given, as you're aware, a $500,000 grant from the USDA to set up a seed bank and get the germplasm back into the system here. And man, I'm just so excited about that. And also talking about genetics and around extract genetics, you're probably well aware, because it's been a week and a half now, we've seen 2 lawsuits, and I knew they were going to come. One, a $40 million lawsuit, and another, a $30 million lawsuit against company HempLogic based in Washington. And these are, of course, allegations at this point that millions of seeds were sold, and they were sold as these are feminized seeds. There'll be a certain amount of CBD in these seeds. Feminized meaning no male. So we don't mind males in grain and fiber crops. No problem. There's male plants in there. It is what it is. This is a plant that can be both dioecious and monoecious and hermaphrodite. Meaning both sexes can grow on the same plant, or only one sex can grow on the plant, or, just an interesting combination. But the bottom line is you do not want male plants with your extract hemp, because they will pollinate the females, and you're wanting to really breed up the resin, and you do not want any males in there. So then these millions of seeds are sold. They're planted, and the labor, this is a very labor-intensive crop, particularly if you're growing for extract, and you have to pull males out of your big, thick acres and acres of hemp field. And so the allegations, of course, are we were told that we weren't going to have males in the field. We're spending tons of money pulling males in the field, and we were told that within these millions of seed, there were only a certain amount of varieties, and they all had these certain characteristics. As it turns out, the allegations are that there are up to 12 to 15 varieties, and it's a major problem. And so all of those investments for those farms are going to be an issue. Now, putting my other hat on, I will say that it is a shared responsibility. I feel terrible for these plaintiffs to the extent these allegations are proven as true after due process. But the reality is I'm scratching my head going, who on earth at this stage in the game, if you have half a clue about farming or agriculture, would believe that they were actually buying millions of seeds that fit the criteria of the representations being made by the sellers. So I do think it's buyer beware.
Absolutely.
Do your homework. Man, I think there would be some shared responsibility there. I would just laugh if somebody told me that they had access to millions of seeds right now for extract hemp that were female and stable. And yet it's an interesting issue. And we don't want folks who are excited about the crop and to experience all of these crop failures or unsuccessful crops, because we want folks to really gain some traction with the understanding and confidence in the promise of this plant and what it can deliver. So buyer beware on those seeds, huh, Aidan?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, on the seeds, on getting contracts with processors, definitely have a lawyer look it over. Don't just assume that everybody's there for your benefit of you. I definitely agree that it is very much a shared responsibility. Certainly, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's not necessarily more and more resources are coming out to kind of tell somebody what they should know if they're looking into buying seed or if they're looking into getting a processing contract with somebody. There's still a lot of information that's just not out there or is misinformation. And so that can kind of push people in the wrong directions. But I 100% agree that it is very much both sides of the party. Like, it's not great that we have a bunch of people trying to sell snake oil, but it's also, you have to very much be aware of what you are buying and what you're looking for to buy. I mean, also just like the products, the CBD products in stores too. Most people don't know what they're buying. There was the study that was done 2017, I believe, that found like 75% of the bottles out there of CBD were either mislabeled, had contaminants in them, or just didn't have CBD at the levels, or even had THC at the levels that were too high. There's a lot of growing up that this industry needs to do. We're kind of in this like gray area, being that like fiber industry is pretty much good to go because that's all legalized. But if we're talking about extract, it's not illegal, but it's also not technically illegal yet, at least in terms of the federal government. Different states have their own laws.
I just have to get in there because I love to educate the listeners. Of course, the FDA, that is a guidance position. So when the FDA says it is a violation of federal law to market CBD as a dietary supplement or a food, that is not actually the law. That's their position, their guidance position. Until the FDA actually makes something called a final determination or a final agency action, it's actually not the law. And the mere 23 warning letters, of course, that they have issued since February of 2015, again, those weren't cease and desist letters. They didn't result in any corrective action or discipline. But the bottom line is that we need a regulatory framework. And the sad piece here is that the industry leaders for hemp extract, safe, assured, quality extract grown with beautiful farming practices on fine soil, because as we know, hemp is a phytoremediator. They are following the codes of federal regulations for the manufacture of dietary supplements or food and beverage, whatever applies to them. It's folks who are either pretending that the federal government doesn't already regulate dietary supplements and food and beverages. They do. And if you are making those products, you are beholden to the code of federal regulations governing those products. And really, and as many of the public comments that were submitted to the FDA during their public comment period around seeking data and scientific research around for cannabis and cannabis-derived products, that public comment period took place this year between early May and July 16th. Many of the leading industries, I wrote the public comments for the Hemp Industries Association with our committee, and some other private companies submitted theirs as well. And there's nothing that needs to change, just your existing regulations. But adding in regulation around purity and potency, like how many milligrams is going to make a drug form of CBD versus a dietary supplement from CBD versus a food and beverage, and also around labeling issues. So it's really purity, potency, and labeling. They need to just simply supplement the existing regulations for those. So in any event, we need clarity. We need clarity around that. Yes, the status, it has been absolutely removed from the Controlled Substances Act 10 ways from Sunday, hemp and its derivatives and its compounds. Let me ask you this, Aidan, because I know you've had some very interesting conversations with some of these industries that you have outreach to that could implement and be benefited by incorporating hemp fiber into their products. Could you share with us, whether you found it humorous or interesting, a conversation or interaction that sticks out in your mind that you've had with one of these officers or executives?
Well, when coming at people from the fiber side of things, it's definitely gotten a lot easier. Before the Farm Bill passed, it was definitely very challenging to talk with anybody. Now that the Farm Bill's passed, most people are familiar with it, though I've still found cases where police officers are not familiar that it's legalized. So for those who aren't familiar, when you get a license in New York State, you have to actually notify all of the police departments for your jurisdiction that you're going to be growing industrial hemp or extract hemp, so that if they get called, they know who to contact and they're not scrambling or have to arrest anybody. I went into more police stations than I needed to go into just because I wanted to get everybody kind of informed about what's going on. And I'd say out of the 7 police stations I went into, one of them was actually vaguely familiar with the Farm Bill. The rest of them were like, oh, it'd be great if they could legalize hemp. And it's like, oh, well, hemp has already been legalized. So that's interesting. Then another note on this, talking with many bankers too. Now that we can actually bank with hemp, there's still many bankers that don't know. Like, for example, there's a regional bank called MBT, and I went and met with one of their VPs, and I brought it to his attention that hemp is legal and he can bank with it. He wasn't familiar with that. And the thing about that is like, well, you're in banking. The hemp industry is growing. Everybody makes their money getting in on the ground floor of an industry. try to break into the corn industry, now you're going to have to climb a ladder. Whereas with the hemp industry, you can build it from the ground up. And if you're not in the industry and you're not participating, then you're going to lose out on money making. And so that's really my pitch to most banks. It's like, this is an opportunity for you to make a lot of money. And I'm sure you want to do that. So you should get in on the industry. Yeah, no, most encounters nowadays are a little more open, but there's still people that just don't know what's going on.
I also do the training because I'm vice president to the U.S. Hemp Authority. There was a banker that came to that certification training in Tennessee last month, and he wanted to learn about it because he wanted to see what goes into making a quality assured, safe product. And he wants to be able to service those accounts. Some of these bankers definitely see, hey, this is a whole new industry for us to serve. And he was even considering maybe we would only give loans to people with a U.S. Hemp Authority certification seal because they, of course, they're trepidatious because it has to be a safe bet for them. Absolutely. They're really learning what does it take to have a successful crop because we can't give a loan here that has no chance of being paid back. And it is fascinating to see that. Well, the work that you do, the community outreach, the developing of these relationships with these ancillary services, particularly the ones that we so desperately need, insurance, banking, finance, and to develop these relationships and outreaches and providing information to these different businesses that hemp can serve so many. Just thank you for everything that you do, for hearing the call, for answering the call, for really starting to button up your life's purpose here in your life's work at such an early age. And may it be just fulfilling and ever giving to you as time goes on. It's been 30 years for me, brother, and I feel like it's just getting more exciting every day. And hemp just presses the oil out of me more and more every day as I learn more. And it's just a real honor and a pleasure to be going through this journey with you, Aidan, in the Hempire State, brother. Thank you for everything that you do. And
thank you very much for having me on. And thank you very much for kind of helping me along in this industry. I'm definitely very excited to see where it takes us. It is very much my passion. I could talk about hemp for hours and hours and hours on end. Much of my family even gets annoyed about how much I mention hemp. At least nowadays, I don't always say, oh, you could make that out of hemp. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. And I look forward to seeing where we go next.
So excited. Great, Aidan. Thank you for being with us today.